That's right, U.S. military is not going to be paid during the alleged upcoming government shutdown. And this is something I've dealt with over the past 15 years. I believe this is maybe the third or fourth one, and it's not a secret that these can have a massive impact on military, civilian people that work for the military as well, that may be government service workers or contract workers, that it's going to put a hindrance on everybody. But I will first start out by showing you what the commander-in-chief has said, placing some blame on Republicans as to why this is not being approved. Watch right here.
Folks, I want to take a minute to explain to you what's going on in Washington right now. Just about a week, we could be facing a government shutdown if Republicans in the House of Representatives don't do their job. And there's no reason for us to be in this position. Just a few months ago, after a long negotiation between myself and the Republican Speaker of the House, we came to an agreement on spending levels for the government that will fund essential domestic and national security priorities while still cutting the deficit over $1 trillion over the next decade. Now, there's a small group of extreme House Republicans who don't want to live up to that deal. So they're determined to shut down the government, shut it down now. And it makes no sense. I'm prepared to do my part. But the Republicans in the House of Representatives refuse. They refuse to stand up to the extremists in their party. So now everyone in America could be forced to pay the price. Let me be clear. If the government shuts down, that means members of our U.S. military are going to continue to be on duty but not get paid. And frankly, that's adding insult to injury, since Republicans in the United States Senate have failed to stand up to one of their own senators, who for months has stood in the way of military promotions. Funding the government is one of the most basic responsibilities of the Congress. It's time for these Republicans in the House to start doing their job, doing the job America elected them to do. So let's get it done. We have time. Let's get it done.
If you guys like what you're seeing on this video and you guys have watched the content before and not subscribed, as many of you guys are not, hit that subscribe button. If I've earned your sub today, I would appreciate it to have you guys come back and watch some other content as well of topics we cover like this. So yes, that's President Biden sitting here saying that it is a Republican issue with extreme issues within the party that are trying to halt this and allow military members not to be paid. But this is going to impact so much that many people are not even thinking about. NPR writes what a government shutdown would mean for the U.S. military and national security. I'll skip down here and say service members will continue to report for duty, though they will not be paid during a shutdown. And many of the hundreds of thousands of civilians who work for the Department of Defense will likely be furloughed, says White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby. Many of you guys think that military only work with military, but very much throughout anyone's career, you're going to work with civilians that maybe do the same job but are contract, and a lot of times they're held there to have institutional integrity because a lot of military will go off and deploy. Looking at this, these people that may be furloughed and be told you are not going to be paid, you're not going to work, that means now the active duty are probably going to have to work even harder to hold down while these people have these furloughed periods and are not making money, and they can't even pay their bills and things like that as well, and they're going to have nobody back them up. And on top of that, I know some people are going to say, well, Nicky, the military has Navy Federal, and they're going to make sure they get paid. I will say this till the day I die on my grave and tell you guys, that's great and all, but let's also annotate the fact that a private organization such as Navy Federal or some kind of military core banking system or organization should not be the reason that military members are able to uphold a paycheck and pay their bills. And again, I will say, this is where the military gets politicized over and over and over again. They say, and they do vital, critical work on a daily basis to keep the department going, Kirby told Morning Edition. Separately, the Department of Defense says posts and base services would be closed or limited while elective surgeries and procedures in its medical and dental facilities would have to be postponed. Commissaries would remain open overseas, but close in the U.S. Obviously, overseas, I've lived overseas for 7 years before, so I can talk. You know, the lifeline of military members overseas on the commissary, I understand. But also, you know, if you're going to say that the commissary, the grocery store for the base, is worth the trip and you're saving money and things like that, if it's so great, it would be helping military members save money by going there and obviously not having to depend on the economy out in town and be able to save money that way, especially as they're not paying taxes and things like that. So these are small things that people do rely on as lifelines to save a little bit of cash. They say defense officials warned earlier this week that a shutdown would strategically play into the hands of U.S. competitors because it would cost time as well as money. Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary Sabrina Singh called it the worst thing that could happen, and they said the U.S. military is going to continue to do its job and protect our national security interests and of our allies and partners as well. She said, adding that a shutdown would make those efforts harder. When you don't have your full operating capacity to be able to help with the mission, to be able to conduct an exercise or training, of course, that gets to our national security in readiness. Kirby agrees that prolonged shutdown could harm national security, especially when it comes to delayed management of DoD contracts for things like maintenance, logistics, and procurement. Yes, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think of the very first thing, the most expensive thing, probably the most expensive branch in the entire Department of Defense is the U.S. Navy, where maintenance and being able to ensure ships are ready to react at any point in time is imperative, right? And I will also add to that as well that the ships, for example, in 7th Fleet over in Japan, obviously are in a very strategic location, and there are civilians over there. So I would assume those people would be seen as a priority to make sure that they're going to be able to get the logistical needs. But obviously, on top of that, those people will rely on people in the States as well to get parts and labor and things like that that are happening. So this is not just only isolated to that. There would be a ripple effect beyond that. They say Congress could act to guarantee military pay. Congress made sure active duty military and reservists still got paid during the last shutdown in 2018-2019, as well as those of 2013 and 95 to 96. That's because the full year defense appropriations bill had already become law in those two cases, or because Congress passed specific legislation in 2013 preemptively guaranteeing military pay, roll call explained. It could theoretically do that again now in the dwindling days before the shutdown deadline, and some lawmakers are trying. They're saying our service members shouldn't suffer because of the Washington's dysfunction, Kagan said. At a time where inflation and interest rates continue to hurt our military families, we must continue to get our economy back on track by cutting wasteful spending, but we must also ensure our military gets a paycheck. If you guys don't know, I've done a fall seasonal drop of the Drink to the Foam, as we are keeping with the highest traditions of the U.S. military by holding down the fort of our drinking traditions. You can check out the links down below if you'd like to pick up some merch to help a small creator like myself and continue the message that it's okay to drink to the foam. I will say this. There are definitely a lot of things to consider. Yes, I mentioned that there are private organizations such as Navy Federal and other banks that are probably going to step in to make sure that they cover and still allow people to get paid. And luckily, they are responsible enough to understand the base of their audience and their members that are, serving and that are obviously fulfilling the roles and duties of military. However, a lot of people don't understand. A majority of the country is actually dealing with issues where they can't even handle like $1,000 emergency issue, where, we've seen government shutdowns go down for longer than a two-week pay period, which we'd all agree everybody in the military is making more than $1,000 typically in a pay period. And on top of that, yes, the inflation rates are going up, and military pay is not that high. Like somebody being E1 to E3 is probably making in the mid $20,000 tier range, where a lot of the expensive of today's are much higher than that. Now, I'm not going to be all doom and gloom as far as this goes. There are obviously things that could bridge the gap again with other organizations such as Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, which does give $500 loans without any questions asked. But then I also look at it where, like, why is that even needing to be the case? And which is also why I personally do, try and make sure I donate my own money to them for people to use those resources as well, because I do believe in that cause of helping service members, and they do help with financial literacy as well. I do want to share my own anecdotal story where when this happened in 2013, I had already moved out of my apartment and I'd given my 30-day notice. The government shutdown happened and I was unable to get tickets to my next duty station overseas during this limbo time of unknown time period. Military was not going to pay for my hotel if I needed to stay there. That did not matter. I had to sleep on friends' floors to make ends meet as an E4 in the military. I know what this can do to somebody, and it's very sad that that is the case. But I'd love to know what you guys think about the situation of the government shutdown and what you think will happen in the future with this, and what military members can do to prepare in the future other than budget. Is there something else that we can do to go beyond that? Because we understand a lot of these service members are new to being adults, handling money, financial literacy, it's very hard to dump all this just on them as well, as many people have expected to get 3 hots in a cot by joining the military and having this guaranteed job. So I'd love to know what you guys think about that. But that's where I wrap up the video. If you guys have questions, hit me up over on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, or down in the comments below. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.